This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from right across the continent. Quite a bit to get through tonight, but let's start with a run through the markets here for you. So quite a bit of red ink showing up with respect to the NSE 20 over in Kenya, down by well over 1 percentage point. And that, of course, was a particularly interesting dip. Quite a few company results also showing up today. Kenya Airways still in the red, losing about 7.5 billion Kenyan shillings. Expect more company results to come your way later on Friday. We'll bring you the latest on that and plenty more when they do come our way. In the meantime, here's what's coming up tonight. Nearly 2,000 workers are trapped in a Sibanye Gold platinum mine in South Africa. The US president is suing two banks to stop them from handing over his financial records to legislators. And a businesswoman creates an online shopping platform for hardware in Uganda. All that and more is in the pipeline for you tonight. But let's start with a story that's really been developing in the last hour or so. Some 1,800 workers are trapped as we speak at a Sibanye Gold platinum mine in South Africa after an accident halted the operation of a shaft that's used to move them underground. Now, the company is currently looking at options to bring them to the surface. No injuries have been reported so far. It's not clear exactly how long it'll take to extract the miners from underground and bring them to safety. We'll, of course, update you on this story as we get more information from that side of the world. Now, on to one of the biggest stories arguably on the continent. The African Union has said that it's gotten 2 ratifications from Sierra Leone and the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, effectively meeting that threshold of 22 countries that are needed for the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement to come into force. Now, to recap, it essentially aims to create a single continental market for goods and services with free movement of business persons and investments as well. It will also boost the establishment of the Continental Customs Union eventually. Now, this deal is expected to create a market of about 1 billion people with a combined GDP of over $2.5 trillion US dollars. Countries that have ratified this agreement include Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, and South Africa, among many others. All right, then, it's all very well to speak about the top end of the deal, but what does it mean for you as a consumer, as a business person? Let's find out. And Detta is a Kenyan economist who specializes in trade issues, focusing on SMEs in particular. She's with me in studio right now. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
So, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa had some very interesting numbers on this deal because they're estimating that in East Africa alone, it could boost trade by at least $1 billion, perhaps create at least another 900,000 new jobs as a direct result of it. But is this a realistic assessment, or are we being a bit too optimistic about this?
Well, I mean, the fundamental reality is that they do need to sell the concept. And I think in Africa, the concept has been sold. I think in terms of those figures, they'll be really constrained by 2 issues. One is the infrastructure deficit. Even if we get all the tariffs and everybody agrees on all the tariffs, which will take its own time. Yeah. The infrastructure deficit will fundamentally constrain the ability of people and goods to go across borders and investments. So I think that's one. So I think regionally there needs to be a lot more serious work around the political issues that are preventing sort of the infrastructure deficit from being addressed regionally. But more fundamentally, there's a domestic issue that each country has to address, where there are already domestic factors that constrain the capacity of African private sector, whether it's larger players or small and medium enterprise, from fully leveraging their ability to become productive and profitable and to cross-border trader. So those are really the 2 big issues that I think need to be dealt with in addition to the tariff negotiations.
And in addition to this, because I'm glad you brought up the question of the constraints around these sort of things, because there's also a political dimension to it, isn't it? Because in the Kenyan example, we've seen politicians use sugar, for argument's sake, as one area. They say, well, we can't let in cheaper sugar from other places in the continent because it's going to lead to a loss of jobs. The argument behind the economics behind it is complete nonsense. But that sort of thing still sells. Isn't that essentially going to be one of the main barriers to getting this to work?
This is fundamentally the issue. The non-tariff barriers are the real issue. You can go and negotiate about tariffs and tariff access, and that can all be in paper and sort of trying to be implemented. But the non-tariff issues and the political will are the core constraints within the East African, community in which we function. One of the key things I found in my research is that because a lot of governments are very nationally focused and are held accountable to national dynamics, they will often give up regional developments for the sake of national priorities. So a good example of that is in the manufacturing sector, where pretty much every country in Africa now has some sort of industrialization strategy. So when Kenya sort of goes into the region and says, listen, we're manufacturing all these things, let's sell them to your borders, what some of the neighboring countries say is that, no, we have our own industrialization strategy. We don't want to give up our market to you. Instead, come and build factories here, employ our people, and seed our market. So the real core issues that I think business people will have is those sorts of cross-border issues, but more fundamentally are the own domestic issues that they face that impede their ability to function effectively.
Right, so trade ministers are going to be meeting in a matter of weeks to set out the ground rules on things like non-tariff barriers, payments, and so on and so forth, rules of origin, that sort of thing. What are the 5 things or 3 things they must sort out and they must agree on if this thing is going to work?
They have got to get rid of the paranoia. I mean, if fundamentally these trade ministers sit down and it's business as usual, which often is what happens, then the paranoia that a lot of these countries feel will continue to be the problem. Because you have to remember that whatever region you're dealing with, whatever continent you're dealing with, there are large anchor economies. And so 2 things happen. One, there is a paranoia from the part of smaller economies that these large economies will come in and flood their markets with their goods.
Ironically, we heard that from Nigeria, but
this is exactly the reason why they're not part of this conversation. But on the counter side, in terms of the larger markets, they're like, particularly if you're a very populous country like Nigeria, the counter argument is that, well, we're this huge market and you people are going to flood your products. So there's a fundamental paranoia, which is really a poverty of commons, where everybody is really busy trying to do their piecemeal thing to get their agenda done in the context of poverty, but also in the context of election cycles. So I think one of the fundamental things that have to happen beyond the trade minister speaking is creating the technocratic structure that allows an implementation of these agreements beyond election cycles in whatever African government we're dealing with or whatever African country we're dealing with.
All right, I'd love to continue this conversation, but we're barred. And Zatawere, thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
Appreciate it. All right then, so on to another big story on the continent. Mozambique, especially the country's northeast, it's still dealing with the aftermath of Cyclone Kenneth. The death toll is now 38. Aid agencies are struggling to deliver aid because flooding has isolated many parts of that country. Here's Astatal with the latest.
In the space of little over a month, Mozambique has borne the brunt of 2 cyclones. Cyclone Kenneth hit northern Mozambique, destroying roads and homes. The United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is trying to deliver aid to the port town of Pemba, located in the country's northeastern region.
The supplies that were trying to come in couldn't land because of the rains, and this is something that's going to be a challenge in this operation for the days ahead, because the forecast is that we will continue to have rains for at least the coming days. So we are looking at how we manage this. We're looking at all of the options to get supplies in.
As floodwaters continue to rise due to heavy rain, authorities worry the death toll could rise as well. Authorities are also prepping for a potential cholera outbreak after some wells were contaminated.
With the rains, we had to reactivate the cholera treatment center in Pemba. We will start to assemble the center and bring water treatment devices.
Cyclone Kenneth partially or fully destroyed an estimated 35,000 buildings or homes.
So the major needs that have been generated by Cyclone Kenneth are shelter. So what we saw out there when we flew over these villages that were impacted was entire villages that have been flattened. So people desperately need shelter to be protected, in particular because the rains continue to fall.
Aid agencies are calling for urgent life-saving aid as Mozambique deals with the devastation of Cyclone Idai and Kenneth. Astatal, CGTN.
Right then, so let's get you the latest from the very front lines. Daniel's the Chief of Communications at UNICEF in Mozambique. He's speaking to us on the phone from Pemba in that part of the world. So, Daniel, to what extent has the rain really affected delivery of aid, especially in Cabo Delgado province, because that is ground zero for Cyclone Kenneth?
Yeah, the weather system is still hanging over Cabo Delgado. It's continuing pouring rain. It was actually very difficult for me to come here. Only on the second try the plane could land, and it's obviously a problem for us to deliver aid because the UN helicopters and smaller planes, they cannot take off, and so it will continue to be very difficult. The first hit of the cyclone has devastated the island off the coast, but also several districts. And now we are facing the next part of the disaster, which is the flooding.
All right, I'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you for the update. Daniel, Chief of Communications there from UNICEF in Mozambique. Now then, quite a few things to get through as well. Let's move on to Tunisia. The Ministry of Industry over there says if the country continues at its current rate in accelerating renewable energy projects, it could go well beyond the targeted 30% in the Tunisia Solar Plan 2030. The North African nation is at the moment working to reduce its dependency on gas energy by developing a lot more renewable power sources. CGTN's Adam Chati filed this report.
The Ministry of Industry and SMEs in Tunisia gave its agreement to 10 private projects for the production of electricity from photovoltaic solar energy.
These projects are important because they are developed by Tunisian skills. They will use equipment made in Tunisia and create jobs. They will produce 10 megawatts, 1 megawatt per project. The overall cost of the investment is estimated at about $10 million.
Selected among 23 applications for the creation of solar photovoltaic stations after verification of compliance with technical standards and site security. These projects will be installed in 6 regions.
We
will cooperate with the National Electricity and Gas Company, STEG, for the sale of the electricity produced under the contract called the Power Purchase Agreement.
The CEO of the National Electricity and Gas Company STEG noted that solar energy generated electricity saves fuel. In fact, each kilowatt hour produced from solar energy helps Tunisia decrease natural gas imports. This program aims to increase the production capacity of photovoltaic energy projects from 100 megawatts to 500 megawatts. The targeted capacity, generally wind, solar photovoltaic, is 3,500 megawatts by 2030. The launch of the renewable energy projects by the Ministry of Industry and Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises is part of the action plan for the acceleration of renewable energy initiatives announced by the government in May 2018. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Quick run through some company headlines. Kenya's second largest bank by assets, Equity Bank, plans to acquire the banking assets of Atlas Mara in a couple of countries, Rwanda, Zambia, Tanzania and Mozambique. Now that marks the third major deal among lenders in Kenya since the government capped commercial lending rates back in 2016. South African Airways has reached an agreement in principle with its lenders to roll over $642 million of debt. The deal will buy the unprofitable state carrier more time to restore its battered finances and turn operations around. SAA has not made a net profit since 2011 and it's currently surviving on handouts from South African taxpayers. And the commodities giant Glencore has lowered its full-year copper output goal as the metals trader deals with multiple problems across operations. Just last week, Glencore announced that the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC, is investigating it for possible corrupt practices. And that is adding to an existing probe from the Department of Justice. And finally, Samsung has reported a 57% decline in first quarter net profit. The South Korean tech giant posted a net profit of about $4.3 billion in the period between January and March. The result is the latest string of bad news for the tech titan. Last week, it was forced to delay the release of its much-hyped $2,000 foldable smartphone because the screens were cracking and not working. That's a run through your headlines. Time for a short break. You're watching Global Business Africa. When we come back, our team in South Africa will be focusing on the country's unemployment rate ahead of the general elections. All that and more is coming your way from Mzansi.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
On May 8th, 27 million South Africans go to the polls. Africa's most industrialized nation is just emerging from recession and still faces enormous economic challenges. Join us on Global Business Africa for a week of in-depth coverage and analysis on the state of the country's economy. A different perspective of events shaping South Africa.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Welcome to our special coverage on South Africa's upcoming election. We're coming to you tonight from South Africa's Constitutional Court. Well, let's get into it. Now, when President Cyril Ramaphosa assumed office early last year, he announced an ambitious plan to attract billions of dollars in investment to South Africa. A huge part of that plan was revamping its industrial parks across the country. Now, these industrial zones were constructed to house large manufacturing and industrial users in one place as a means to boost economic growth, especially for the surrounding communities in the country. Now, these parks are also part of the government's plans to grow manufacturing and production facilities in the country and increase competitiveness and, of course, course, one of their key aims is to create thousands of jobs for the people of South Africa as well. Well, Sumitra Naidu went out to find out more about this parks, and here's what she had to say.
This is the new Karankoa Industrial Park in the capital, Pretoria. Government spent $2 million on revamping the infrastructure. Industrial parks and special economic zones create a one-stop shop for buyers and investors.
This is the 8th industrial park that we have rehabilitated as the DTI. And these industrial parks are scattered all over the country. And often have a fairly nefarious history. There are investors in place, there are economic activities already in existence, but also many of them have got potential to expand and increase their economic activities.
While government is investing in the rejuvenation of the industrial parks, it doesn't take ownership. These are public-private partnerships to help economic development. The Northwest Development Corporation will run this industrial park.
Very excited with the input that the DTI has brought in, because the revamp of this park would contribute, I think, to the manufacturing sector. In this specific park, we've created more than 5,000 jobs, and we have about 283 units that are operating currently.
For small business enterprises, the infrastructure will assist in reducing costs. It will help with exposure. There will also be more safety.
Well, obviously from the infrastructure that we can see here at the moment, obviously from the outside fencing and what they've done, obviously to protect the businesses inside of the industrial park, it will obviously have a big influence. It would be less cable theft.
The industrial park has 283 developed units that are mostly occupied by manufacturing and commercial businesses. Only 70 units are still open for lease. It's hoped this newly refurbished industrial park will create the jobs needed in this area and support local communities. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Pretoria.
Now, of course, Sumitra Naidu herself joins us on a set at South Africa's Constitutional Court. Great to have you with us, Sumitra.
Thank you very much, Ruchi, and welcome to South Africa.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We are here at such an important place at such an important time, 25 years of democracy, and the Constitutional Court is really a symbol of democracy and justice. So welcome.
Right, and of course we're here because of those upcoming elections. They're coming up next week, and of course one of the huge topics, we just saw your package on industrial parks, one of the huge topics going forward will be jobs, jobs, jobs. A concerning trend that is coming to the fore now is the fact that we're seeing less and less youth participating in these elections. They're saying the number of youths under 20 registering have dropped significantly. Do you think this is a sign of voter apathy as we head into those elections?
That's right, Uche. Definitely some voter apathy coming through. And, interestingly, the youth have never really got that involved in the elections. But we are seeing a marked decline in the number of people that are voting, that have registered to vote this year. Right. In fact, in the 18 to 19 category, which is really important, these are young people. It's the first time that they are getting a chance
part of the population
to vote. You would find that they would be very excited to vote, but that's actually dropped to 16% from 34% in 2014. So very concerning. It's very expensive for students to study. So there's a big fight going on. Fees must fall. They feel that, there's too much of corruption. They're being forgotten. And as you say, youth unemployment, a huge concern. It's over 50% in this country. It's a really, really big problem. And I think that is what, and from the package that you're going to see, the insert that I've done, I've spoken to graduates, and they're expressing that. They're really disappointed and they don't know how and when government is going to listen to them.
Right. Well, let's take a look at that insert.
It's a rainy and cold day in Johannesburg. Young people are out and about, some on their way to different tertiary institutions where they hope to gain the knowledge they need to pursue their dreams. But for millions of young South Africans, this is no easy feat. Even with education, finding employment is difficult. Bongi Zondi graduated with a BCom degree in 2014. He's managed the odd job over the years, but has yet to find a position as an accountant.
The key challenges are that we are expected to go and study, but when we're done and we are graduates, we don't get employment. We have so many responsibilities as graduates.
Ntonto Katsi also completed her studies in 2014. Despite attempts to pursue her career in the hospitality industry, nothing has materialized.
I'm one of the graduates that are struggling to find employment ever since we left varsity. However, I have been employed after I've graduated for like about 8 months, and then after then we apply, we go for interviews. It's hectic, it's not going anywhere. After the interview, sometimes you don't even get a reply whether you did good or did bad.
The economy grew a mere 0.8% in 2018. South Africa has been stuck in this low growth phase for almost a decade. ANC policy has done little to create jobs.
South Africa is one of 2 or 3 countries in the world where youth unemployment is over 50%. The way that government has looked at it is to pay a subsidy to a firm to say, give this person their first job. Because all around the world, if you haven't had your first job, people don't yet trust you. People don't know what your work ethic is like. You need to be trained up. Even if you've got a very good degree, you're not used to working 9 to 5.
People under the age of 29 years old make up 21% of the electorate. That is about 9 million people. But only 50% of that number are registered to vote. Even new first-time eligible voters are not keen. According to the Electoral Commission, only 16% of youth aged 18 and 19 registered to vote in this election. It's a massive drop from the 34% in the same age group registered in the 2014 election. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, of course, looking at that package and going forward, it certainly seems like the ANC is expected to take the monopoly this time around again. It's probably going to win this election. A lot of people say Ramaphosa, he seems to have restored faith in ANC for many voters, especially with his economic restoration plan. But looking at the 3 contenders, do you think there's a clear economic plan for the country going forward?
It's so interesting, Uche, because we unpacked some of these plans and we looked at the different parties and we didn't find anything really different there. Right. South Africa has huge structural problems. They need structural reforms. They are unable to create jobs. And this has been going on for years and years, different policies being tried mainstream, and it hasn't actually worked. I mean, we have the new development plan, which is meant to create 5 million jobs. It's supposed to turn around industries. But it's strategized around between 5 and 7% growth. We are barely making 1% growth at the moment. So you need to restructure your policies. And I found that amongst the parties that nobody was really talking to that on how they were going to change it, how they were going to create jobs. So for me, I found there were lots of missing pieces there, and it still needs to be addressed. And you need to actually cater for this country and its needs and its skill set as well.
Well, quite interesting, because I spoke to Mohammed Noordin. He's a political consultant today, and he said some very similar things as to what you're saying. Here's a look at what he had to say about youth voting in the country, voter apathy, and of course the economic plan going forward.
The staying away from youth does not necessarily mean it is an organized, conscious a movement to stay away. I think it probably is just that youth do not feel included, and there are no structures in youth. So if you look at within the African systems overall, volunteerism, political activity at a young age, genuine, real political activity, not delivering pamphlets, before an election, is really absent. And within youth movements or youth structures in political parties, most of these youth movements are actually nothing more than subservient tools to the main body of whichever political organization it might be. And so many times even the youth leadership there is nothing more than a reflection. So it's just, youth replicating what the old guard are doing, or playing old dog politics. So I think there is a problem we find with youth in Africa, and I don't think it's a unique problem to South Africa. But I mean, we hope that with social media and the way in which communication takes place in this day and age, I don't want to sound that old, but I mean, if you compare it to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, definitely they probably, I think governments and political parties will be forced sooner or later to touch base with the youth. And I think this is where the AFF also came in, because the AFF is a young movement. Right. The leadership, I don't think there's a leader in the AFF, a senior leader who's above 45. Maybe there's one or two who could be in the late 40s. Julius Malema, I don't even think he's 40 years old. I think the average age of the MP of the AFF is probably mid-30s, early 30s, if even that high, So they are speaking to youth, they are speaking the language of the youth, and they're speaking to disgruntled, apathetic, unhappy, poor, impoverished youth, and that of course is also growing the numbers.
Right. Well, ironically, the main contender, President Cyril Ramaphosa, he's been looked at as sort of that bridging that divide, restoring faith in the ANC, restoring faith for those who are disgruntled, especially after former President Zuma's rule. Now, looking at his strategy, he looked at reviving the economy. At the same time, he looked at reining in corruption as well, but at the same time, it hasn't borne much fruit. We haven't seen that plan bear much fruit yet. The economy is still dragging quite far behind, persistent low growth we're seeing. So do you expect he will maintain this strategy or his economic restoration plan going forward? Or what do you expect to see in terms of his strategy to attract voters going forward?
I think there are two issues. The first issue is the economic reform agenda. President Cyril Ramaphosa has been the president of the ANC for just about a year and a few months, and has been, for the lack of a better word, interim president, because he took over from President Zuma also about just around a year or so. And this has been a year before elections. So I presume it has been very difficult for anything concrete to take place as far as developing and executing and rolling out some of these, of the quote-unquote new policies. Although every president in every part of the world, they promise, growing the economy and rooting out corruption. Right. That is not even an election strategy anymore. It is, it's a necessity. That's what every president promises. I think even when you are president, you also promise to grow the economy, and the question then is, what new is it that President Ramaphosa can do? I think a very important part of President Ramaphosa's mission, and I think there is something that he's trying to attain, and I'll show you how he tries to attain it, is improving the image of South Africa. And a very important part of improving the image is to show the rule of law. It has to show the security and safety for investors and investments. And I believe with the numerous commissions that are running at the moment, commissions of inquiry which are exposing corruption, the rehabilitation of the National Prosecuting Authority and specific units that will tackle the corruption charges emanating from these commissions is a very clear sign, or something tangible, a tangible action that the president has taken towards tackling corruption and also improving the image by showing that the institutions of law enforcement and judiciary are working correctly.
And some people believe the biggest challenge for President Ramaphosa going forward will be balancing skeptical investors, balancing the interests of ANC and of course fed up South Africans as well. What do you think are going to be the biggest challenges he will face in ensuring that everybody's happy, or balancing these three different areas of the economy?
I think post-elections, it will be much easier for President Ramaphosa to balance, because once he's through the election, there'll be more energy and time to focus on delivery, and there'll also be the capacity to consolidate power within the ANC, deployment of a new cabinet. There's a speculation that the cabinet might be reduced. I mean, I don't believe it would be reduced drastically, but you would probably see a certain amount of reduction, consolidation. I also believe that due to the elections, there's been a lot of skepticism from international quarters. Typical example is the nationalization of the Reserve Bank. I mean, our president was in Davos last year, 2018, and was very clear that there will not be a nationalization of the Reserve Bank, although this made this got to the ANC election manifesto, nationalization of the Reserve Bank. And this is the type of environment you have to navigate through when you are the president of the party. I mean, will we ever see the nationalization of the Reserve Bank? As an example, as an analyst, as a consultant, and speaking to contacts and people in the know, it's highly unlikely. But it is an important election promise, which unfortunately the ANC had to get involved in the Reserve Bank issue, and they had to get involved in the land reform issue, because the popularist EFF drew them, and took them down that line. But post-elections, there's no need for the ANC to continue as vigorously as it has during the election campaign during that line. So then it can focus on being more concrete, more transparent, or I would just say more certain.
Well, there you have it. A number of key issues on the table during this election. Of course, we'll be bringing you all those details. That's it from Johannesburg. We, of course, want to thank Sumitra Naidu for joining us on this broadcast. She'll be bringing us updates as the days go by.
Absolutely.
And, of course, tomorrow we'll be focusing on job creation, economic equality, big issues like land reform. And we'll be coming to you from Pretoria, where we'll be speaking to students and stakeholders. Thanks for joining us.
Bucho Koronko there in South Africa. Now, still in that very country, some interesting union news. The Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union, you know them as AMCU, it's in danger of being deregistered by the country's Labour Department. In a notice issued in the Government Gazette, the Labour Registrar argued that AMCU has basically ceased to function as a union. Here's CGTN's Angela Coppola with their reaction.
AMCU's Joseph Matunjwa called a press conference in Johannesburg to deal with what he's called the alleged deregulation. AMCU represents around 250,000 members in the platinum and gold sectors. One of the issues that the registrar appears concerned about is how the leadership spends the money it collects from members.
All audited finances of AMCU are in order. There is no issue. I heard you media, you are talking about 7 billion that is in AMCU Kula. Show us. Where is it? Show it.
Matunjwa says the money isn't invested, it's spent on its members. It doesn't have an investment arm like the other prominent union.
All the monies of AMCU service our members. During the strike, show me any union when they are on strike, they can spend millions to support their members on strike. Show me. It's only this union. Show me any union when their members are on strike, they can transport their members to home. In all the corners, the province of the country, except AMCU in this country. Show me. I've never heard any member of AMCU complaining about the finances of AMCU because they see their money used to them every day.
The union says it plans to meet with the registrar in the coming days to sort out the matter once and for all. He's commented that AMCU isn't compliant in terms of voting for office bearers and holding national meetings. Matunjwa denies not holding an elective conference.
Any organization has got the right to postpone. Why our right are being undermined as the NEC? Why? Why? It's within our constitution to do that. That's a power that is vested to the NEC of AMCU to remove or to postpone. We are not running away from the Congress.
Fighting words from Matunjwa, and the next 60 to 90 days are going to be really interesting, especially as we enter those platinum wage negotiations. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Global Business Africa. It's time for a short break. Plenty coming up, including this. We'll explore why the US president is suing 2 banks to stop them from handing over his financial records. And a group of high-end designers in China are bringing a new meaning to the phrase "made in China."
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's focus on the United States President Donald Trump. He sued two banks to stop them from handing over his financial records to Congress. And that, of course, is a fairly interesting development. Now, the lawsuit essentially focuses on Deutsche Bank on one hand and Capital One on the other. It was filed after a Democrat-led committee issued subpoenas for information about his personal finances. His three eldest children and the Trump Organization have also joined that particular lawsuit. Now, it argues that there are no legitimate grounds for investigating his business affairs at all. The lawsuit aims to block the banks from complying with subpoenas issued by the Democrat-controlled Congress, investigating the Trump's family's financial dealings. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is due to be sentenced at a court in the UK for breaching his bail conditions. The 47-year-old was arrested earlier this month after spending 7 years holed up at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. He took refuge in that embassy in 2012 to avoid extradition to Sweden over a sexual assault case that has since then been dropped. WikiLeaks exposed just about everything from US military secrets to tax evasion records by the wealthy. Assange is also wanted for computer hacking in the United States, and he faces an initial extradition hearing later on Thursday. Turning to China's manufacturing and services sectors, April's Purchasing Managers Index was down a little bit, 0.4 percentage points compared to March, but still above the key threshold of 50, which separates expansion from contraction. The service sector also declined on the month, but maintained stable and positive momentum.
China's Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index in April edged down closer to a 50 threshold, which separates contraction from expansion in the manufacturing sector. Fresh data from National Bureau of Statistics and China Federation of Logistics and Purchasing show manufacturing PMI was at 50.1%, declining 0.4 percentage points from the previous month. Analysts say the figure was better than in the first quarter, despite falling behind March.
Although the figure was a little bit lower than in March, it could still reflect that China's economy is stable.
High-tech manufacturing recovered for the fourth consecutive month, thanks to an acceleration in industrial upgrading. The sector's PMI was at 52.9% in April, 2.8 percentage points higher than the general PMI. Small and mid-sized companies also showed positive momentum, gaining 0.5 percentage points compared with March.
Operations and market expectations of small companies are getting better, a reflection of China's tax cuts.
Meanwhile, PMI in the service sector was at 54.3% in April, pushed by brisk business activities and a construction recovery.
Operations in the financial service sector have been quite good, further supporting brick-and-mortar businesses. April and May, or even the whole second quarter, is the busy season for the construction sector. So the effects of investments in the construction industry will become more obvious.
Experts say that among the 21 surveyed sectors, PMI figures of 19 industries were above the 50 threshold. Song Yaotian, CGTN.
While housing prices in China's megacities like Beijing and Shanghai do remain sky high, a small city in the nation's northeast province has suddenly become famous for its extraordinarily cheap apartments. Are we looking at a signal here that China's housing market might be cooling? CGTN's Feng Yilei investigates.
Hegang, a little-known city in China's northeast, has earned an overnight reputation on social media for its low home prices. A 50-square-meter flat costs an estimated 20,000 yuan, less than $3,000. Fang Huixue is one of them selling his property at such a bargain price.
I got 2 apartments after my old hut was demolished. One of them is now vacant. I'd rather sell it soon to pay for my children's tuition than spend more on decorating it.
Since the city rolled out renovations of its shanty towns, many like Fan have been relocated to new flats. Some with more than one house tend to sell the unwanted ones at mere market prices.
The relocation project enables residents to move into new apartments at almost no cost. A great many of these affordable homes somewhat reduce the demand and price of commercial residential housing.
At a local housing agency, most houses for sale cost over 2,000 yuan per square meter. That's about $300, much more than the anecdotal low price. Though it seems that extremely cheap homes are exceptional cases, the average housing price here in Hegang is still rather low. In Hegang, it's quite common to find a 50-square-meter apartment worth about $15,000. But with that money, you can hardly buy even 1 square meter in downtown Beijing. And locals have also seen a gradual cooling of Hegang's housing market.
In recent years, property trading volume has been declining. Housing prices used to be stable but have dropped this year. I think a dwindling population has led to falling demand and price.
Experts say Hegang is a microcosm of northeastern China's Rust Belt, which now faces a dual problem of obsolete industry and resource depletion. After its longtime coal mining sector became sluggish, Hegang lost its luster, leading to an outflow of talent, a decrease in consumption and downward housing prices.
I believe the transformation of our city will boost the real estate sector. Building industrial clusters of coal, graphite, cultural tourism, and pollution-free food will attract more people to Hegang and increase demand for living and working space.
While home prices in nearly all 70 major Chinese cities edged up 2 years after Beijing's restrictive policy to curb overheated housing markets, cities like Hegang are looking to end the plunging trend, a sign of their long-awaited urban renewal. Feng Yilei, CGTN, Hegang, Heilongjiang Province.
Chinese brands also making a splash in New York, and they're challenging the attitudes around the Made in China tag. CGTN's Wang Guan has more. Some industry experts say America's perception of China and Chinese creativity is long overdue for a change.
From luggage made of aircraft-grade aluminum, to jewelry worn by Lady Gaga, to designer clothing with an Asian touch, and luxury watches combining Chinese craftsmanship and Swiss technology. Nearly 20 Chinese brands are here on display at Grand Central Terminal in New York, one of America's oldest and busiest train stations. China Chip Pop-Up is the exhibition's official name. Many of these luxury goods are challenging preconceptions about Chinese products here in the West.
You are certainly breaking the stereotype. These are high quality, highly produced, artistic products that anyone would like to own, if you could afford them.
Many brands come from China's fashion industry, a sector that has long been considered little more than copycat of the West. Yet the country's independent designers are looking to change that. Wang Ning is founder of Play Lounge, a leading Chinese fashion destination with over 500 designer labels. She believes the key for Chinese products to succeed in the West is not by becoming more Western.
Classical Chinese decorative fabrics featured many Chinese cultural elements. This type of fabrics and design are used by Dior, Vera Wang, and Chloe for their latest product this season. Many Western consumers actually resonate with products that have a rich cultural connotation. I definitely see a trend here, the resurgence of Chinese embroidery and decorative design.
Western brands still dominate the global market. According to a research by McKinsey in 2018, US and European fashion companies such as Nike, H&M, and Zara currently account for 97% of global profit. Chinese-American cultural icon Yu Saikhan, who helped organize this event, believes Chinese companies need to catch up quickly, especially in marketing and communication.
Some of the brands here, they think that they can use WeChat. In America, nobody uses WeChat. If you're going to do a business here, you better know how to do business. They have to understand what Westerners need and do, or else how do you sell to that market? So this is a very inexpensive way for them to test the market and to test themselves, actually.
Some industry experts say America's perception of China and Chinese creativity is long overdue, adding that these kind of exhibits could help America see what's really happening in China. Wang Guan, CGTN, New York.
All right, then a quick run through some commodity prices here for you. It's a little bit interesting, the numbers that we're seeing at the moment. So Brent crude to start with, around the 72-ish area. We'll see if the events in Venezuela do play into this over the next week or so. But even at these levels, this is up 30% so far in the year. Some news from Kenya as well. Large producer black tea coming into the market. In the 9 months at the end of March, we had about a 5% rise in total outputs to something in the region of about 869 odd million kilos of tea coming into the market, but it's costing you a lot less. Prices over that period of time did fall by nearly 20%. Here's what's coming up next. A businesswoman has created an online shopping platform for hardware in Uganda. And we'll explore what Tunisia is investing in as far as artificial intelligence is concerned.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. A businesswoman in Uganda is helping to reduce the cost of housing and create a lot of visibility in the market with a new website where builders can buy their supplies online. Paola Amupaire's shopping platform means essentially they don't have to travel to specialist stores or mining areas in order to source construction materials. CGTN's Leon Sinyanga reports tonight on Grassroots.
Viola Amumpire is looking out for new orders for building supplies like cement, lumber and tools. She is the brain behind winnerhardware.com, an e-commerce platform for building and construction materials. Initially, her target market was Ugandans living abroad who wanted to build back home.
Winnerhardware.com is an inspiration of stories of Ugandans abroad that send money back home to friends, family, and this money, instead of it being used for buying construction materials, it is instead used for people's personal gains. So I thought, why not have a platform where people are able to buy construction materials all at once in just a click away.
It's still common for shoppers to come to a physical store like this one and purchase the construction materials they need. But with an online store, for some, the hardware shopping experience is starting to change. And for site engineer Siraj Ngati, the platform offers convenience, speed and value.
There are certain materials that are never in established facilities, like how cement is. So it's just a click away. You place your orders and materials come on time. And in construction, that saves time.
It can also save money, which Amumpire hopes will help her website to thrive.
It's a promising space, and especially for construction, if people are to save more and use their money for better investments, I think they will find that the digital or virtual businesses or virtual mode of shopping are the cheapest means possible.
It costs Amumpire about $20 a month in internet costs to run the website. Her main clients are household builders, but large-scale contractors are also using the platform. That positive response is giving her hope that while construction remains an expensive venture, she can attract more customers by helping them cut their costs. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kasangati, Central Uganda.
Let's move on to Tunisia now. It's working to position itself as a hub for investments and research in artificial intelligence and machine learning in North Africa. Its government recently created a task force and the steering committee to develop a national strategy on AI. The new program is designed to encourage public and private sector actors to adopt artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve services across the country. Here's CGTN's Adnan Chachi with that report.
The Tunisian government has launched a program to raise awareness among 1,000 companies of the importance of adopting the artificial intelligence system and keeping in line with the progress of the fourth industrial revolution.
The Ministry's plan for the period 2018 to 2020 aims to support companies, develop the industrial sector, promote technology transfer, and promote research and innovation.
100 entrepreneurs were supported and 500 managers trained in industrial technology as part of a program to encourage companies to adapt to the artificial intelligence revolution.
We will set up a roadmap on artificial intelligence technologies, particularly in the public sector. We will launch clusters specializing in artificial intelligence that will bring together the various stakeholders like research centers, industrial companies, startups, technology clusters and universities.
Anis is the founder and CEO of Innova Robotics, a Tunisian company founded in 2014. It specializes in the design and manufacture of mobile robots.
We are training robots on collecting data and learning new skills. Many jobs will disappear in the near future. They will be replaced by artificial intelligence. Tunisia must be ready for this ongoing revolution.
This summer, Tunisia will host an international meeting on artificial intelligence on an African and Mediterranean scale. It will be organized as part of the Open Innovation Initiative. Experts at the Ministries of Industry and Scientific Research assert that the global artificial intelligence market has reached $7 billion. It will hit $25 billion in 2025. Tunisia aims to become a leader in North Africa in this promising field. Adnan Chachi, CGTN, Tunis.
All right, then a quick update on the currencies that we do follow here. If you're looking at the rand essentially as an indicator of sentiment around the South African election, it really doesn't actually tell you much because in the month of April, it's only weakened by about 1% against the American dollar. Those elections, of course, are not that far away. The 8th of May is the date to keep a very close eye on. We'll keep an eye on the dollar-rand cross and, of course, plenty more right here for you on the program. That's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. There's several ways of getting your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.